Welcome to the Show Me Podcast with your host, Geoff Livingston. Every episode, a guest joins Geoff and discusses how images tell stories and what makes them work or not.
Hey everybody, this is Geoff Livingston. That's the first time we played that live before we've gone in. It's pretty fun. Thanks to my friend Carter for recording that. And today we have a very, very special guest, my good buddy Joe Newman, who has joined us kind of on the fly. And he is a fantastic gentleman. He runs a nonprofit called Focus on the Story. And that nonprofit helps photographers basically engage in storytelling through their imagery. And also, in addition to that, we have Joe runs a photo festival called Focus on the Story, which is also part of a larger photo festival, Click DC, which is month-long, and it's coming up this June. So with that, hey, Joe, how are you?
Jeff, thank you for having me here today. Appreciate it.
Well, I really appreciate you coming down. I was hoping to get you after the festival when your hair is a little more calm and you can rest easy and enjoy the show, but I really appreciate you coming in today. And, you know, as you know, we talk about a famous photo or a famous set of photos usually before we dive into what somebody does. And today we're going to talk about Colin Kaepernick and a couple of photos that featured him. And the first one I want to talk about is the GQ cover, which was shot by Martin Schaller. This photo did pretty well. It was notable, probably more because of Colin and his news history. What'd you think of that image? And, you know, if we could have Panama, who's our sound studio person, show that image in the video, that'd probably be helpful to people. But what'd you think of the GQ cover with Colin?
I think it was instant, iconic image. I mean, I looked at that photo and you, obviously it's designed that way to sort of harken back to the Black Panther Party movement of the 1960s, Bobby Seale. You know, you see that image and you think, you know, this is really well put together. I think that you know, it has a certain dignity to the image, and it's also let's not kid ourselves. It's a trigger. I mean, it trigger. You know, as much as some people may find that image is a strong, powerful message, others are going to see that image and see something completely different.
Right. And it's kind of powerful, right? I mean, he's very serious looking. He looks well off, right? So it's not like he's suffering. I mean, he's got, as we all know, these black leather jackets today that are sport coats, man. I mean, that's pretty penny, right? And he's got, you know, a nice chain on, all that stuff. But you're right, it does have that iconic kind of image with the, you know, he's got his afro and everything like that, and he's, you know, he looks tough. He looks tough. He looks serious, and it fits kind of his message, you know, where he's really trying to change the way we think about the way the country treats African Americans. So, so you think it worked then?
Yeah, definitely. I think it works both from the symbolism of the image and I mean the way they put it together. I mean, I like that. I like what it says.
Right, and then, oddly enough, that was published in 2017. Nike came out with a Colin Kaepernick series of ads, which were part of, woo, man, somebody's got their Harley riding. We're in downtown DC, folks, so you're just going to have to deal with it sometimes. But, you know, Nike had its Just Do It anniversary campaign come out. I'm not sure if it was 25 years. I think it was. And, you know, obviously Just Do It was kind of associated with Michael Jordan during that era. And that whole Charles Barkley kind of thing where I'm not a role model. But, you know, it's kind of faded away a bit. And then all of a sudden, boom, here's this Colin Kaepernick ad with the video with him walking around downtown New York. It looked like maybe it was San Francisco, don't know, or Oakland. But the black and white photo they showed of it was basically from the same shoot by Martin Schaller. They panned in. They made it a lot tighter of a crop. And it looks a lot more serious. If we could show that too, Panama, that'd be awesome. And it just, the difference in the vibe of the campaign was noticeable, right? Like we went from, wow, that's a really powerful cover image to like batshit crazy. Nike sales are up by 30%. And everybody's talking about this campaign. Like everybody's talking about it. Even Trump is flipping out on Twitter because that's what he does, and you can't have anything not be about him. So this thing is going off. Why? I mean, it's the same shoot. It's roughly the same look, right?
Well, I think there's a couple of things with this image that strikes me when I first look at it. And one is that they crop it in very tight on his face.
Right.
So they take that. What is he known for? His hair.
Right.
I mean, in that hair is not just hair. It's an afro, which has a lot of symbolism and meaning to it as well in Black empowerment. So they took that out. It's like, look at me, Colin Kaepernick, as a man. This is what I believe. Take the politics out of this, and just sort of judge him by his eyes.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's funny. So if you've read about these photos, it is supposedly the same photo. But thanks to our buddy Cade Martin, who was originally going to be here today but had a personal item come up, he pointed out that with these images, if you look at the catch lights in the eyes, there are actually two different photos. Like this one has the classic Schaller cat's eye, two lights coming in at a 30-degree angle, while the other one kind of has the top-down octabox lighting. Both are very, very clearly close in the way that they look, but it is a different shot, and it's probably shot intentionally to be close in this sense, I believe, probably.
Yeah, it pulls you in, right? It's very intimate. I mean, you have to just confront him and, hopefully his message as well. And there's no escaping it. It's there's no, just it brings you right into Colin Kaepernick.
I think that's an interesting point that you just made. Like, you can't dismiss him. You can't just dismiss him like, oh, he's got a jacket on, he's got a look on, he's trying to be like Black Power. Like, no, this is him. This is who he is. And you've mentioned that, and it's extremely powerful in that sense. Like having him like the eyes cropped, there is nothing else there. This is the message. This is me. This is what I believe in.
And the decision to go black and white with the image, you have to. I mean, there's an old saying that, if you take a picture in color, you're taking a picture of the people's clothes. And if you're taking a picture in black and white, it's of the person. I didn't get that exactly right. But, that's, and, we take some of the tones out. It's basically a monochromatic image with, it's not really black or white. It's gray. It's gradations of gray.
Right.
So it that also symbolically maybe strips away the whole issue of race. Colin is biracial, but here, it's a monochrome image, and I think it's well done. And I would have loved to have been in that boardroom in Nike listening to the conversation, because it was. I'm very cynical about Nike and its motives, and they did really well after this ad came out. Their initial reaction was negative, and they lost some value in the stock market in the first day or two.
Well, that's the whole Trump thing, right?
Within a week, they had gained that back and more.
Right, and their sales in the first 24 hours were up 30% on the site.
And they know their market. I mean, it's to me, it's like if you have a mailing list and you have unsubscribes. You're going to send something out that's going to get some unsubscribes, but it doesn't matter, because the people that unsubscribe were people that were never going to buy from you anyways, or we're going to interact with your message. So Nike knew that. They what's interesting, Geoff, on that, because I know we're both marketers.
Yeah, that's right, folks. We're reformed PR people
and photographers.
Recovering
is that Nike? The polling on that is that for the first time, Nike had there's people out there with a negative reaction to Nike prior to the.
Yeah, there were people burning their shoes, like
right.
These MAGA people, right?
Prior to the Colin ad, there was really no negative. There was just, you either cared or you didn't care. You didn't really have a negative opinion towards them. Afterwards, I think the polling was 17% of the people polled had a negative reaction.
So it's funny.
Nike.
It's funny. Like I teach a class at GW on digital communications, and one of the things we discussed after this ad came out was whether or not Nike did this intentionally to provoke that reaction. Because if you play the game of there is no good press or bad press, and in fact, if you have a constituent or a stakeholder audience which feels opposite of the way the people that negatively do, if the negative people are poo-pooing something, that might actually strengthen your brand, to your point. And so it's highly likely that Nike kind of knew that they would get a backlash and intentionally provoked it.
They definitely should have known if they didn't. But yeah, so the people that like Nike like them even more, and actually would have gone out and and you're making a political statement now by buying a set of Nikes, because you're like, the negative reaction was actually good because it told people, hey, you need to go support Nike for what they did and go buy some shoes.
Absolutely. Okay, that's very interesting. So I would say, generally speaking, we think the story worked.
Well, bottom line, if you look at their financials, it definitely worked for them.
They made some money.
It made people think. It made people talk, and that's, I think, when we talk about photography, if one of the ultimate goals is to make people think.
Yeah, I think one of the other interesting outcomes of that was during that time, the NFL was still in this kind of period where the owners weren't really allowing the players to kneel and protest, and they were kind of keeping this issue ongoing. And in the ensuing months, just the first few months after this campaign came out, first 6 months, let's say, the NFL settled with Kaepernick. They created a policy which kind of didn't exactly appease the right-wing people that didn't want kneeling, and didn't appease the players, so it's probably the right policy, right? Nobody was happy. But at the same time, like they put the whole thing to bed when they were just letting this thing languish. And I think this ad and its popularity probably played a role in making them realize how bad this is, because Nike's got a huge relationship with the NFL. And all of a sudden, here's one of your top sponsors just basically rolling it up and saying, like, take that, man. We don't care anymore. This is how we feel about this issue.
Yeah. No, it was... I don't feel sorry for the NFL, but they were definitely in a position where...
The National Felony League.
They couldn't win either way.
Yeah. Yeah, I have all sorts of things to say about the NFL, and its owners. Nevertheless, thank you, Robert Kraft. Let's move on to some more fun stories. And let's talk about Cuba. You and I went to Cuba. One of the things that your nonprofit does is it takes people on journeys to go see some things. And I think this is the first time I've spent a lot of time with you. Like, we've known each other, but you asked me to join a group of 7 photographers, including you. And we all went to Cuba and Havana. This was during the Obama years when it was just opening up. In fact, we came right after Obama was down there. And we spent several days down there. This image of a farmer was taken by you with your awesome Leica. And if we could show that, Panama, that'd be awesome. And then, it was just a life-changing trip for me. I really felt like I came into my own as a street photographer, because I was around other photographers that were street photographers, and being in that environment was just incredible.
Oh,
Some of the
you
best
killed
photos
it.
ever.
You killed it. You killed it.
It was fun. And we did a book out of that, right? 7 and 10 by 7 or 7 and 10, or I don't know. It was like some bad Star Trek name or something.
7 and 10, and you are the person who named it. So
Yeah, blame me. Some marketing guy. It's good I'm picking up the camera now.
Yeah, I love Cuba. I mean, that was my 3rd trip. The one that you went on was my 3rd trip to Cuba. And I've been back 7, 8 times since then.
Wow.
And all with groups of photographers. We do workshops in Cuba, storytelling workshops. And, I probably will go again next year if I can. I mean, the fact is the president has announced new sanctions, tightening some travel restrictions. So we're still waiting to see how that shakes out, to whether or not we can still continue to take groups there.
Right. When you take people on a trip like to Cuba, or if you go somewhere else, and you mentioned you train them on storytelling, how do you do that? I mean, what are some of the tips that you offer, especially somebody that's more just getting into photography?
Yeah, the workshops have evolved. When we went together on that first trip, it was really a beta trip. I didn't know how to put a trip together. It was my first time. We had a lot of activities. It was in the middle of the summer. It was very hot. That taught me a lot of things. But the one thing that I took away from that, and maybe after 2 or 3 workshops, probably after the 2nd workshop, I started feeling, this is a lot. We're not really getting to know the country this way by just going and doing these setup shots. So really, the whole thing about this is to kind of get in there, meet real people, don't worry about the camera so much, and going out and getting the cliche shots. We have interactions with people from all walks of life. The farm where we took that picture, I still go back there.
Right.
And it's not about making pictures at the farm anymore. It's about just sort of meeting people, talking to them, seeing, just learning more about their lives in that country, and sort
More of like a Nat Geo type of story, where like a traditional one, not like the travel magazine.
Yeah. It's. I mean, we still have some setup shots. We still go to the boxing gym because
That's awesome.
People love going and shooting that, and I've gone back there. All the guys there know me now, and they're, hey, you're that guy who comes every year. I'm like, yeah. But beyond that, we spend a lot of time out. We stay in local homes. We eat in some of the local places, and try to get beyond the standard tourist destinations.
Right. And when you consider Cuba and your time down there, in your mind, what is the story of Cuba now?
Yeah, it's shifting, right? When I went down there, people were very hopeful, very optimistic, because it looked like there was going to be a change in the way our two countries interacted with each other, that things were opening up. They were seeing that as possibly changing their lives. The average Cuban earns $24 a month. It's not a lot of money. So to survive, to get ahead, having a piece of that tourist dollar is essential. I talked to one friend of ours, Sergio, and I said, Sergio, a lot of Americans, a lot of people that come on my trip, initially say they want to get down to Cuba before America ruins it. And, that he just looked at me and laughed and said, we're already ruined. We need the Starbucks and the Kentucky Fried Chicken
Right.
and the McDonald's, bring it. And you really have to look at it from their perspective. I mean, people need that foreign investment, and we're not. I'm concerned. I'm concerned about the economy down there. We see what's happening in Venezuela. I'm concerned that Cuba is on the edge as
brink.
well.
Yeah.
And we're giving them a little nudge, and that's scary because
And I think that's
people,
what they want, right?
Yeah.
That's what this administration
People are
wants.
going to die. People are going to die.
And their buildings still collapsing like they were. I mean, when you and I were there, it was like at least one a day, if I remember correctly.
So, yeah, the stat that I found amazing was, amid this hope in Cuba with all the new restaurants that were opening up, for every restaurant that opened up, there was 600 that opened up in 2016. 600 new restaurants
And the food is
in
good.
Havana, but 900 buildings had collapsed in the same year. So, it was,
Wow.
I mean, it was disproportionate. There was still buildings collapsing and people in those buildings when they collapse. It's a
horrible.
country that is a beautiful country. The people are amazing. And I sincerely hope that we can bring them into, a democracy. I mean, we shouldn't, we shouldn't give their government a pass. I don't know. We don't want to become political in your
Right.
in your podcast, but
It's too late on this one.
Hey, it's your fault.
It's gone, man. If they're still listening, they're in the same line of thought, I think.
Yeah. Well, I hope things can work out.
Yeah.
Because I've met a lot of people down there and consider them friends, and
I think that's like one of the things that I got out of it was really kind of heartbreaking in a lot of ways to see how bad Havana was. And when I say this, I grew up in Philly in the 80s. It was not a good place, right? And I've personally been jumped a few times down during that era. And I go back to Philadelphia now, and it's, going through the whole gentrification bed, and it's different. But when I got to Havana and I thought back to Philadelphia in the 80s, it made Philly look like Disneyland. It was just destroyed. It looked like a bomb had gone off. And just seeing the poverty and the suffering that a lot of people were going through, and still how happy and nice and kind they were, it made me think about how these political situations can really just, unfortunately, punish people that live, the actual people that live in these places.
yeah, most definitely, they're getting caught in the middle between our two governments.
Yeah. So when you see the classic kind of like Cuba, Malecon, like lots of vibrant street color with these old rolling wrecks, as they call them, classic cars. What is your opinion of those now that you know the story of Cuba?
You know, my opinion is they're great. I mean, you know, a lot of people you hear them say, "I'm going to go to Cuba, but I'm not going to take a picture of any classic cars." And I'm like, good luck with that.
Right.
You know, because it does
everywhere.
it does become a cliche in the sense that everyone that goes there gets those pictures. But you know, those cars mean a lot to the people that drive them. They've been in their families for you know 70 years. They don't sell those cars. A lot of people say, oh, once relations open up between U.S. and Cuba, there are going to be a lot of car collectors coming to Cuba and buying those cars, but they're not going to sell them.
Right.
And they're not the same cars that they were in 1958.
No, the guts are completely different.
But you know they're beautiful cars, and so I don't think it's a cliche. I think it's part of the Cuban culture and the colors that you know that you get down there. That's reality down there.
That's the Caribbean. Yeah.
So it is, you know, they know it's a point of pride with the Cuban people.
Great. So before we transition into the unprecedented project, after you and I went to Cuba, Focus on the Story, your nonprofit really kind of took root, I would say, and really started to prosper in its mission, or at least migrate towards mission. Can you tell people what Focus on the Story does?
Yeah, let me just correct the record a little bit there. So Focus on the Story didn't really exist at the time that we went to Cuba. We really just incorporated last year. I put on a film festival, put on a photography festival here in D.C., called it Focus on the Story. After that festival, we incorporated as a nonprofit. So we really haven't even been official for a full year yet. So, but where it got its start was probably the unprecedented project that you're going to talk about. Was I had this idea for a photography project that would, because I ran a photography community here in D.C., I knew a lot of the best street photographers, and I said, why don't I gather a crew, and on the inauguration, the day of the inauguration, we do one of these 24-hour projects, because it was going to be a historic moment, right? The first female president in the United States was going to take office, and we would document the whole day as sort of a special
and how wrong we
online project, right? We woke up the next day after the election. I was like, well, there goes that project.
I remember being on the White House lawn photographing in Lafayette Square the night of the election. It was horrible. People were just shocked.
I remember your images from that night. But after a couple days, and then in the reaction to his election, you had plans for a huge protest. I knew that all of a sudden it started. There were going to be a lot of protests on Inauguration Day, and that weekend the Women's March was starting to form. It was taking off on Facebook, and I realized this is going to be a better project in the sense that the photos are going to be more dynamic and dramatic for that weekend. So we shifted gears. We kept the team together and added some more photographers. In all, we ended up with 28 photographers on our unprecedented team to kind of spread out through the city on the 3 days of the inauguration: the day before, the day of, and the day after, which would be the Women's March.
Right.
And that was, that project, sort of that collaborative project with a mission that we ended up publishing a book, Unprecedented, the inauguration of Donald J. Trump and the People's Response.
Right.
And that
book did pretty well, right? I remember.
Yeah, we raised about $20,000 on Kickstarter.
Wow.
And published the book and had a big reception in a gallery exhibit later that year.
Right. And if we could cue up the image, I think this was my entry that was put into that gallery. I'm using this because I don't have the rights to other people's photos.
That image, I love that image, but the image we put in the show and in the book was black and white.
Right.
So this is actually the first time I've seen it in color.
Right.
And did you colorize that at all, or is that the natural? That
was the natural color? Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. It's a little bit intentionally overexposed above so that they would be exposed well below. But yeah, it's an interesting photo. I mean, you have these two ladies that are walking to or from an inaugural ball, dressed in the dead of winter in mini skirts and no jackets, and they're completely oblivious to this protest sign that's in the middle of McPherson Square, right?
Yeah, no, that was part of the vision when we put this project together. I knew that having been in D.C. and through inaugurations, I knew the balls would be a big thing, and that there would be this sort of juxtaposition that you found, and that we have in other pictures in the book, where you have the revelers and the protesters sort of sharing the same space. I have a photo in the book of a couple fellows with "Not My President" written on their hats, and there are 2 or 3 people behind them in tuxes, sort of looking uncomfortable, trying not to stand out. But it was a
crazy.
It was a terrific,
few days,
emotionally draining weekend for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember, I think that was my first experience with Antifa as well, not liking photographers and chasing them around. And, I remember like these, to me, because I'm old, they looked like pimply kids from AU, like with black masks on and trying to be tough, flipping me off. But, it was funny. They got into it a little bit with some of the Trumpers too, and the police were pretty present. And some of the best photos to come out of that project involved them, right? With some of them getting tear gas. And was it Mukund that took the photo of the guy getting the milk in the eyes, or?
Mukul, yeah.
Yeah, Mukul, sorry.
Yeah, that was a great image. That whole day, that was the day of the inauguration. And that, that there was some windows that were broken early on in that day, McDonald's and in a Starbucks. That sort of put the cops on alert. And what they did, because I was there when it started, they rounded up everyone and sort of sat them down at 12 and L in sort of a police barricade. And they had all this phalanx of officers lined up around them. So they were just like, have this police line. And these guys were all sitting there, waiting to get processed and taken away. And these cops are kind of standing there, and then someone threw something. I think it was a plastic bottle of water. And that was, as soon as that happened, there was tear gas, being shot into the crowd and pepper spray, and things kind of went chaotic. But
right.
But it was it was. I'm not gonna lie. It was scary at the beginning.
Yeah.
But after,
you kind of felt like the city might blow up.
Yeah, you didn't want someone to throw a brick.
Right.
And someone then, it turned really violent. But they were shooting rubber bullets into the crowd. But the
things that people don't talk about a lot.
The flashbangs were really scary at first, but then you kind of got used to them because there was a certain pattern. You hear the little metallic ting, 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 and then wow. So you knew that when they were, you knew that ting, 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 you had a couple, seconds to prepare.
Right.
And they just sort of marched us down the street, down to K Street, over towards, I think, 14th, and that's where they kind of made their wall.
Right.
And that's where the limo was set on fire. And
right.
It was a crazy day.
Scenes you don't normally see in Washington, D.C. in the United States of America.
On the day that we transition in power, to have that happen is not something that we've ever experienced before.
It's been.
Actually, I did some research.
60s, right?
Lyndon Johnson, when he became president, there were some protests and there were some things thrown at the motorcade, but nothing like what we saw.
Right. So let's move forward just and wrap up with another fast forward of a couple more years. Cuba being 2016, the inauguration 2018, and now
17.
It's 2017, 2018, yeah. And now it's 2019. You're in the second year of Focus on the Story, the conference, and we have this big photo festival, Click DC. If we could show that, that'd be awesome. And that's coming up next month. Tell us what these new evolutions mean.
So Focus on Story, the first, it's 3 days of talks, and we have really some of the best photographers in the world coming in and doing talks over the course of Focus on the Story. And we did that last year. We had Martin Parr, we had Dwayne Michaels, we had Joel Peter Witkin. Those are legendary names in photography. And it was a great, in my opinion, and people I've talked to, it was a success. There were a lot of people enjoyed it. This year, because that was not enough work for me, I said, well, you know what? Let's spread this out. Let's create more of a grassroots community thing. And I reached out to dozens of. In full disclosure, Geoff, you are on our organizing committee for Click DC. And we reached out to dozens of people in the community that run organizations, that have galleries, that have clubs, that have stores, and asked them, hey, if you're going to do something in June anyways regarding photography, do it with us, and we'll promote it, and you promote the festival, and we'll just, it's not one organization, it's dozens. And we're just here to sort of look at photography and have this shared sort of love for it and its ability to entertain us, to inspire us, to educate us.
I'm amped. I'm excited. I'm particularly excited for Focus on the Story, the conference, because it's on my birthday. Woohoo! And, it's on Saturday. So what better way to tell my wife, well, it's my birthday, so I'm going to be gone all day at a photo conference. Bye.
Well, we'll have to have a cake that day for you.
Only if you throw it in my face. There you go. That's cool. And then throughout the month, we've got these individual events. You've got your kickoff event at DuPont Underground, and
we got a big kickoff party on May 31st, and that we'll have projection. We'll be projecting exhibits. We'll have a silent auction of some really great prints that we're gathering for this show. All the money raised will go to Focus on the Story and our programming, which is to support visual storytelling that has a social impact.
Right. And friends of mine, if you're listening to this podcast or watching it, definitely register for my event at DuPont Underground. I think it's June 13th, where we're going to be photographing models underground, and every amount of money, every profitable dollar goes to Joe and Focus on the Story. So
thank you.
Moment. Yeah.
And go to clickdc.org for the full calendar of events, and you'll see Geoff's workshop there. A couple other workshops that Smithsonian Associates. I don't want to go through all of them because I know I'm going to miss a couple, but there's a lot of things there.
Lawrence Jackson, right?
That are free.
Yeah.
That month as well. There are some social gatherings. There's some exhibits, and really sort of shine a light on the vibrant photography community we have here in DC.
Right. So click DC for the larger festival, and what's the URL for Focus on the Story?
FocusOnTheStory.org.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Joe Newman.
Thank you, Geoff. This was fun.
Appreciate it. Let's get on out of here.
Thanks for listening to the Show Me podcast with Geoff Livingston. More shows, sponsorship, and donation information are available at showmepodcast.com.